Okay, I don't want a transcript. Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. And welcome to the first ever Career Changers workshop brought to you by the Career Changers Legal Network and Later On Lawyers. It's two community and support groups for aspiring and career changing legal professionals. I'm Melanie Aarons and I'm a solicitor at Irwin Mitchell and I'm the founder of Later On Lawyers. My USP is that I had a 23-year period between starting my LLB and qualifying as a solicitor in February this year. My previous career experience has been in the local authority children's services. Nedra Daniel's my co-host and she's the founder of the Career Changers Legal Network and she's a trainee solicitor at Hal Jones LLP. She's also the chair of Westminster and Holborn Junior Lawyers Division. Nedra converted to law after a decade-long career in the Royal Navy. Nedra and I are excited to bring you this morning's workshop, which hopefully will be crowned with advice, wisdom, inspiration, and encouragement for your legal journey. Just some housekeeping points. The speakers will present you on their chosen subject in turn, but please feel free to put your questions into the chat and we'll answer them as best we can as we go along. So as I said, please note the session is going to be recorded for the benefit of those that can't attend. So feel free to turn your camera off if you don't feel comfortable, but please do engage in the sessions. We want you to get the most out of it. So now turning to the timetable for today, we are going to kick off this morning with Nettie Yassim. She is a trainee solicitor at CMS UK and she's also the professional ambassador of Aspiring Solicitors. She's a student mentor at Grow and as well as having a background in the local authority as a volunteer coordinator amongst other roles. She's going to be talking to you this morning about how to leverage your previous career. So that will be super. Then that will be followed by Jess Booker. She is a talent professional who covers all things recruitment, development and EDI, and she's going to be doing a session on CV writing for career changers. That will be followed by Ayaz Sabor. Ayaz is a professional coach to aspiring lawyers and the founder and mentor at the Commercial Law Pathway, which helps aspiring and junior lawyers navigate their early career. He's going to be giving us wisdom about training contract applications. So we look forward to that, Ayaz. Thank you. That will be followed by Sarah Breyer. She is a professional confidence and career coach with a specialism in intimacy. She's the founder of Skip the Line, which is a community membership group helping female entrepreneurs to build their business. And she describes her mandate as helping quiet people get jobs. So that can be ideal for any of you who are feeling a little bit wobbly or daunted by the law interview process. So thank you, Sarah. That will be followed by me. So I'm going to present my session, but in a change to the planned schedule, I'm now going to be sharing a Q&A that I had with Marissa Sanders. She's the head of early careers at Irwin Mitchell, and she's going to share her insider insight into what law firms are actually looking for when you put in that application form. And she's been the head of careers at Irwin Mitchell for 10 years, and she's a career changer herself. So I think that hopefully will be massively beneficial for all of you. And then we have SQE aficionado Catherine Snook. She is a commercial property solicitor who qualified this year via the SQE route. She's held various previous careers, including, I see from her LinkedIn, as a weather presenter. Catherine is the founder of the SQE Success Hub and owner of SQE Success Limited, which is a coaching company for SQE students. So she's going to share her story and tips for navigating the legal journey. And as she posted this week about how she had completely avoided losing grip with reality during SQE study, being a trainee solicitor and a parent. So we'll all grab a cup of tea for that one, Catherine. Thank you. And finally, we'll have Nedra Daniel. She's going to talk to you about networking and building your legal brand. And she'll cover such things such as LinkedIn optimization, industry events and groups. So that's an action-packed schedule for you. Hopefully we'll have time for some questions and answers at the end, but we're already quite a bit behind. So please do feel free to connect with any of the speakers this morning. If you want to have questions, send questions to them directly. Nedra and I will link you up. Okay, so without further ado, I will hand over, hopefully, to Nettie, who's going to talk to you about leveraging your previous career.
Thanks,
Thank
Melanie.
you, Nettie.
Thanks a lot. Hi, everyone. Oh, well, you've already said a little bit about me, Melanie. I wasn't expecting that. But good morning, everyone. I'm Nettie. I'm currently a full seat trainee at CMS, and I'm due to qualify finally early next year. I did my first seat in insurance litigation, my second seat in real estate planning, my third seat in litigation arbitration, and I'm currently on secondment in my fourth seat at Liberty Specialty Markets, which is a big US headquartered insurer. Sorry, I haven't got any slides. I've been going through the qualification process this week. So I was preparing for my own interviews on Wednesday and Thursday, and I just didn't have time. I'm afraid you've just got my tired Saturday morning face. I'm sorry, folks. So I'm going to talk to you about leveraging your previous experience in other lines of work when you're transitioning to a legal career. But before I get started on that, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about me and how I got to this point. I've had many, many jobs over my lifetime. I come from a socially mobile background. I grew up on a council estate in East London, and I was the first member of my family to go to university. So I've had one job or another since I was about 14. So over the years, I've worked on a market stall, I've worked in retail, I've been a teaching assistant, I've been a doula, which is a type of unqualified midwife, and I've even been a film extra. If you pause Paddington 2 in the opening credits, you'll spot me crossing a road. That's a bit of trivia for this morning. But my main role for over a decade was being a full-time mum and carer. I've got two girls, and my youngest daughter was diagnosed with autism and complex learning needs when she was very young. When I couldn't find appropriate school provision for her, I took on the responsibility of educating her at home. I successfully challenged my local authority to fund me, and I used that funding to employ a team of 18 people who I trained to help me run a full-time home education program for her. And we did that for over 6 years until she was able to move into secondary school. As a result of that experience, I then landed the role that Melanie mentioned. I worked as a special educational needs and disability advisor for a local authority. And that involved advising families and young people on their rights and schools and colleges on their obligations. And it was while I was in that role that I finally bit the bullet and enrolled on a 3-year part-time master's qualifying law degree at Birkbeck College. I started that degree while I was still working, so I was working the day and going to college at night. I finished that degree in 2020 in lockdown. I got my training contract offer in 2021. The firm sponsored me to do my LPC, which I finished in 2022. And then I started my training contract in January 2023. So we're almost at the end. The end is in sight. But before I talk about how I leveraged my previous experiences, I did just want to say that when I was applying, which is only a few years ago, I attended countless open days, insight events, conferences, webinars at law firms, and I never met a single person anywhere near my age at any one of them. Even the phrase career changer, I think, was quite rare back then. But I've seen a real shift. Not only are there platforms like this, which is amazing, and all of you guys that have been involved in setting this up, I really commend you. I wish you'd have been around when I was applying. But yeah, there is a shift. There are these sorts of platforms, but there's also the fact that I think that firms have really firms that have taken on career changes are increasingly alive to the value that we bring. And so they're taking much more of an active interest in career changes in the recruitment process than I think they were back then. So I think that's a great sign for you guys, because it's a much more welcoming market now than it was when I was applying. Right, so how did I leverage my previous experiences? To be honest, it was long and painful because I didn't understand what law firms wanted to see from me in applications. I thought it was like any other kind of recruitment process that I'd been through before. And it just isn't. And I think once you kind of get your mind around that and really sort of get into the nuances of what they're looking for, it will be a lot easier to sell yourself. I also felt that I was at a disadvantage because the few other career changes I did meet along the way, as well as being a lot younger than me, also had what I thought of as relevant experience for a legal career. So, for example, people had worked in finance or marketing. Yeah, I think I met someone who worked in advertising. It just felt like they had more relevant experience, whereas I didn't have any experience in those areas. And I hadn't even worked in a corporate environment before. So I felt very much like a square peg trying to get into a round hole. But as I said, once I sort of got to grips with the process, it got easier. And that's what I want to try and distill for you in high level terms today quickly, because I realize we're short on time. Firstly, I'd say you need to understand that you're applying for a role as a trainee and you're not pitching yourself as a partner yet. And I'm saying that because I think that is a common mistake that career changers make, especially those that have built up seniority in their former or current roles. By the time I'd left my role as an education advisor, I was managing a team of 25 people. So it felt like a real shift moving from that into a trainee role. In your current role, you might be responsible for budgets, you might be managing a team, you might be making strategic decisions, but you've got to remember that the role of a trainee is a junior role. And by making the decision to change career, you are accepting that you're going to be at the bottom rung of a ladder again. So you need to demonstrate to the recruiter that A, you understand what the trainee role is, and B, that you have got the relevant skills and qualities to be a good trainee. So the way I did that was I found it useful to set out two tables. The first table had all the jobs that I had done, including any relevant voluntary experience. And then I had two columns. One column had all the experience I'd gained in each of those roles. The second column had every identifiable skill and quality that I had shown in that role. Then you make a separate table listing all the skills and the qualities required of a trainee solicitor. So for example, I'm going to drop in a document into the chat if I can that's got a load of skills and qualities that are required of a trainee solicitor that when I started, I was filling this in. I don't think you need to be quite this detailed, but I'll send it anyway if it's of use to anyone. But high level, I'd say they're things like multitasking and managing competing priorities, teamwork and collaboration, effective communication, proactivity, those kinds of things, which undoubtedly you will have shown in various ways in whatever previous roles you had. But once you've got both tables, you highlight anywhere where you see a match between the two. And then those examples are the focus of how you're then going to sell yourself in applications and interviews. The other thing is each firm you apply to will have a mission statement or somewhere on their website that highlights their core values or pillars or however they're describing it. And they're a good starting point for deciding which examples you're going to prioritize. So for example, CMS had a really strong focus on innovation. So I included that as one of my key strengths. And I talked about how deciding to home educate my daughter was a creative solution to the issue of there not being appropriate school provision to meet her needs. So it's kind of thinking creatively about what you've done and how to rephrase that into a way that tells the firm that that's a skill they're looking for that you have. But that was the part that I did find most difficult because I was so focused on what I thought was missing from my CV, like corporate, commercial, legal experience, that I couldn't see all the other valuable, relevant skills and qualities that I had that would make me a good trainee. So an example I like to use, especially for people that might, like me, be coming from really non-traditional backgrounds and from areas of work that where there isn't really an obvious link between what you were doing and the career you're choosing to go into. And the one I like to use is being a parent. So I couldn't see how I could extract any relevant qualities from being a mum and a carer. But then when I set it out on paper, I realized that I could talk about having excellent organizational and time management skills, adaptability, creativity, staying calm under pressure. Being a doula demonstrated my ability to communicate sensitively, to build trusting relationships, which trainees have to do with their clients and internally with their supervisors and partners. The other one I like to say, especially for those of you that might be a bit more junior or, you know, you've had some sort of work experience, but maybe you haven't like had years in a particular industry, is a lot of people have retail experience when they're students. And retail experience is brilliant for highlighting examples around delivering excellent customer service or dealing with difficult customers, which again, you will be doing as a trainee. I was going to show about, I think, yeah, actually what I'll do is I'll drop that document into the chat if I could get it. It's a table that sets out in much more extensive detail all the other kind of hard and soft skills that I think are quite common to training contract applications and the kinds of things that would come in useful when you're a trainee. But just to say as well, if this is helpful, that now there was all of that stuff that I kind of learned in terms of how to get my foot in the door. But now that I'm almost at the end of my training contract, I did a talk recently where someone asked for my top 5 kind of tips for what have actually been useful now that I've started the job. And I thought it might be helpful to share that here. So I'll just tell you those very quickly. I've mentioned a couple of them already. Being organized. I mean, I thought I was organized coming into the job, but God, you really have got to be on top of absolutely everything. There's a huge amount to juggle, and you've really got to be well organized to manage it all. And you'll have people that rely on you to know the details of things that they don't have in mind. They kind of delegate that to you. And so you've got to be across everything. So yeah, if you've got relevant skills that you can show where you've done that already, that's great. But when you come into the job, it has sometimes felt like a whole new level. Prioritizing workload, I think I've kind of mentioned that already. But a tip that I mentioned that I thought lots of people knew because I've been using it for years, but I realize not everyone does. But if it's new to anyone, I use the Eisenhower matrix, which you can just Google and you'll get like a template of what it means and how to use it in work. But I find that really, really helpful. And I do that at the start of every day to organize my workload for the day. I say number 3 is reliability and consistency. And this is something that I think career changes bring because you've probably had experience elsewhere. The more you can kind of prove yourself to be a safe pair of hands, the more you're entrusted with better quality work, the more you can kind of show them that you deliver high quality work on time to the standard that they want, the more likely they are to ask you to do more. And that just speeds up your development. I'd say number 4 is being a good team member, but within that, I'd say having a lot of enthusiasm and a positive energy that you can bring to work is really, really helpful. Hours are long, the work is demanding, clients are demanding, there are tight deadlines, you're often under a lot of pressure. And the more you can kind of maintain a positive attitude, again, it makes you a valuable team member that I've found has given me opportunities that I don't think would otherwise have been made available to me. And finally, I'd say the key ingredient is having resilience. And that's something that is different to everyone. But I'd say it's just about taking good care of yourself, looking after yourself so that you're able to give your best in work and outside. I'm a parent too, and I loved what you said earlier about someone losing their mind during the SQE, balancing study and home life and all the other things you have to do when you're a bit older. It is very, very, very challenging. And the more you can kind of build support networks and take care of yourself, the better you'll be across the board. I think that's all I'm going to say for now. I hope it's been useful. I'm going to try and stay for the rest of the session, but I might have to drop off early because I'm waiting for my daughter to arrive back and she might be back before the end of the session. So if I do miss the Q&A, please feel free to link in with me, send across any questions you want to ask me there, and I'll do my best to get back to you. But hopefully I can stay till the end. So thanks a lot.
Nettie, thank you so much. I am just blown away by it's just so fascinating to different people's life journeys, apart from all of that wisdom that you've shared. And thank you for offering to drop your top tips matrix, master sheet, whatever it looks like, into the chat. That would be really appreciated. But wow. And I just think it's that word that you used actually about being creative, that really struck me because you really do, it's about you're going to have to think creatively, but all of those skills are there. You just need to match them. Pistachio, you've got your hand up. You've kindly been waiting with your hand up. Do you want to jump on and put a question forward?
Yeah,
Hello.
I just sent a question to the chat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because if you're a career changer, sometimes it's hard to convince somebody that to recruit you because you're a career changer. And how did you convince your employer that you were so determined to be a lawyer?
Yeah, I think that is a good point as well. And that comes to another thing, which I was going to talk about, but then I thought I might be treading on someone else's toes because I know there's lots of other people coming up in this session. So I'm sure Jessica and Ayaz and a couple of other people might talk about this. But the other part is obviously, you're right, demonstrating your motivation for the role. I've kind of focused a little bit more on transferable skills and qualities. But you are right. You have got to be able to convince them that this is actually really what you want to do. But I actually think that sometimes is a bit easier for a career changer, because unlike a law student who's straight out of university, it might be their very first job. It's quite easy to sell to someone that you want to get a job when you're a fresh grad. It's different when you're talking to a recruiter about leaving a role that you've already got experience in, that you might already have made quite a significant career progression in. And so it's a sacrifice you're making as well as a move towards something. And I think that can be quite compelling in itself. That kind of does speak a little bit to motivation. You might have current security where you are, but you're motivated enough to leave that behind, to take a chance on something a bit unknown and very difficult and very challenging. And if you've already started study along the way, if you've self-funded that, I've self-funded the first degree, the part-time master's. I talked about the fact that I had to be motivated. I was working in the day and going to study at night. I've got 2 children. One of my children's got additional needs. I'm also a carer for my mum who's got Alzheimer's. There's a lot going on in my life. If I wasn't motivated to do this, I wouldn't be putting myself through this just because I'm a sucker for punishment. I really want this career. So there are different ways of, obviously each person's situation is different, but I think that's a good starting point. You're leaving something behind to do this. So yeah.
Nettie, when I in my session, which is a pre-recorded interview with the head of, as I said, early careers at Owen Mitchell, that's exactly what she says. They see that pistachio at the law firms. That's exactly, so you've got mortgages, they see that the commitment, it strikes through just by your circumstances in life, and that you're moving a mountain to actually do this. Thank you, Nettie. That was really helpful. And in the interest of getting on track, I'm going to thank you. As I say, really, you spoke from the heart, and I think that's what actually people really want to hear is the reality. We are now going to move on to Jess, who's going to talk to us about CV writing for career changes. Thank you, Jess.
Hi everyone, and Melanie, thanks for the introduction earlier. Just to kind of also explain a little bit about my background, for the last 20 years I've had exposure to recruiting trainees across a number of law firms, and in my career I've recruited a significant number of career changers. I've recruited many trainees in their 30s and 40s, a few in their 50s, and at least one in their 60s. So I come at this having recruited people with your backgrounds. I'm going to talk about CVs today. Now, to start off with CVs, when you are a career changer, your CV becomes purely about your work experience, basically. The more you progress in your career and the more that you kind of build up that experience and have additional responsibilities, the more your CV becomes just focused on work experience. And what you have to do as a career changer applying for training contracts is take a shift in mindset to go, it is not just going to be about my work experience, unfortunately. It's going to have to be about the broader set of skills and experiences that you have, and demonstrating those accordingly. Now, you're obviously going to be able to leverage your fantastic work experience in exactly the way that Nettie was talking about earlier. I really highly recommend her approach of having those documents with the columns. That is a really good starting block. But law firms are looking for other things, and this is what I will cover in this session in regards to CVs. Now, the first thing that I think is particularly sometimes maybe a bit awkward for career changers is their academics. Now, in a CV, it is really important to demonstrate your academic achievements. You are going to have to write your academic qualifications into your CV. And for a lot of people who maybe did their academics a long time ago, are sat there going like, well, this just isn't me. Like I did these 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. I'm a very different person to when I did my academics. But law is ultimately a profession where you are going to have to complete further academic qualifications, whether it was the GDL or the LPC, or now with the SQE, there is a strong link between your academic attainment and your ability to particularly pass the SQE. And so firms are going to be looking for your academic qualifications and looking to see that there is a ability to perform academically. So it seems slightly counterintuitive when you are a career changer, but actually putting your academics at the start of your CV rather than maybe at the bottom, which it might be for a lot of people. Like, for instance, my academics are now at the bottom of my CV, but I would actually put your academics up front and at the start of your CV on the first page. I know someone just asked a question whether you can include professional qualifications, and you can include professional qualifications on your CV, particularly if they do demonstrate that you've been committed to learning and potentially show performance in those examinations as well. So do include those as well. With your academics, the good thing is that law firms are very less reliant on A-level grades or just A-level grades these days. Many firms have dropped their A-level requirements, but you will potentially even need to provide things like your GCSEs or A-level grades, depending on the firm that you're applying to as well. Do particularly think about how you want to highlight your academics, though. It may be that you have recently self-funded the GDL or the LPC or the SQE. It may be that you have gone back to university and studied a law degree or non-law degree and done something, you know, maybe your dissertation was actually really impressive and you scored really highly in it. Maybe you did do more of a commercial module in a non-law degree and you've got a high score in that. Maybe you want to highlight those in the details of your CV just to show your academic excellence where you can. After your academics, then I would go into your work experience. Now, if you are someone who has got varied roles or has a lot of work experience history, you are going to have to be selective in what you present, because your CV is going to need to be no more than 2 pages, unfortunately. Now, with someone like myself who has now got a 20-year career, even my CV is still 2 pages now, but I don't really detail my roles beyond kind of 8 or 9 years ago now. I put them as headings, but I just don't list them out. And it may be that you want to be selective in the details that you provide for your work experience entries. Think about the roles that are maybe presenting the most relevant experience. And as Nettie mentioned earlier, that doesn't have to be relevant in terms of subject area or topics. It can be skills and abilities in transferable skills with things like research, time management, drafting, whatever it may be. But maybe focus on the things that are a little bit more connected to the industry, and you don't have to detail everything. Be focused and really think about what's the best evidence you've got. And the final thing to mention is, if your experiences supersede one another, so maybe you've done one role more recently that has been very, very similar to a previous role you've done, but is more complex, is more high-level responsibilities, maybe put more detail into that rather than providing lots of detail into the role where you also did very similar responsibilities, but at a lower level or with less complexity. Do you really focus on your achievements and your success when writing your work experience? So by this, what I mean is focus on what happened because you did the job. What wouldn't have happened if someone else had done the job for you? So is that a 20% efficiency in a process because you implemented something? Is it that you saved the company a certain amount of money per year by implementing something different, or by renegotiating a contract, or whatever it may be? Try to think about the success that you've had in your role and highlight those details to show the impact that you've had within the roles and responsibilities you've had, because that sells your uniqueness as well. So that helps your CV stand out as unique compared to maybe someone else who's done a similar role. Now, the thing that can get even more awkward than the academics for career changes is extracurricular activities. Now, law firms really do value extracurricular activities. Can everyone hear me, by the way? Like,
You can, yeah.
oh, good. I was worried. I was worried I'd stuck a little bit. My internet connection dropped ever so slightly, so apologies. Yeah, extracurricular activities are really important for law firms, and a lot of career changers can sit there. As Nettie explained earlier, you've got lots of other commitments, lots of other things going on, and you're doing a full-time job. And a lot of people can go, I haven't got time for extracurricular activities. I haven't got, and why am I going to list the extracurricular activities I did 10 or 15 or 20 years ago when I was at university or school? I would try to think about this differently, because extracurricular activities are really important to law firms because they often actually show a lot of transferable skills and show what you value as a person. And so it doesn't need to be that you are just captaining a football team or, really kind of traditional extracurricular activities that you might do at university. You might be part of an employee network group at your current employer. If you are, that is an extracurricular activity. You may be fundraising as part of your job. You may have either decided to do a bake sale or run a 5K run with colleagues, or done a sleep out project for a homeless charity, or been part of a mentoring program at work. All of those things are extracurricular activities. Highlight them. And even outside of work, you might have been part of your child's teacher-parent association, or you may have done things in the local community. You may be, part of a faith group where you raise funds for your church or your synagogue or your mosque. Extracurricular activities actually bring a whole broad range of things that are the things that you do outside of your job to kind of give back to others or contribute to people who are not just you. And that can also extend to things like caring responsibilities. So you may want to think about how you do highlight the other commitments that you've made to family, friends, your local community as well in your CV in an extracurricular section. So do think about that as well. But do highlight those skills, because it shows that there is more to you than just work. And it sounds really weird when I say this, because law firms are notorious for, long hours and working hard. But I think law firms truly value people who have got interests and activities that kind of keep them grounded and normal, and help them blow off steam away from work, because it is a very pressurized environment to go into. And therefore, having things outside of work that keep you happy and motivated are really, really important. And that's why law firms will often look for them. So do try and show those skills as well. I'm wary of time, but just to then quickly talk about your skills. It is important on a CV to highlight the skills that you have. If you have gained any kind of technical knowledge of any software, languages, anything that kind of helps contribute to your job, then do list them in a skills section on your CV as well. You may want to think about what is relevant and what isn't relevant, and again, be kind of selective in what you do highlight in there. But things like languages can be really important. Things like knowing particular aspects of project management software, or other technical tools, AI, for instance. If you've had any exposure to emerging technologies like AI, you should definitely be putting that into your CV somewhere, because most firms are clambering all over that and are looking for people who may have experience or exposure to that. So do think carefully about identifying those aspects in your skills section as well. When I can see in the there's a question about virtual work experiences as well. yes, there are a whole load of virtual programs, particularly on a platform called Forage. You will also find a whole host of training and learning opportunities with major law schools, both in the UK and the US, where you can learn about particular topics on competition law or international arbitration or tax law. There is a whole load of learning out there. And if you want to, you can integrate into your CV after your work experience and your extracurricular sections, a kind of learning or training section. I often encourage people to highlight these things to show that you are actively pursuing the career and that you are actively trying to learn about them. So if you have done programs like Forage, work experience programs, if you have done a short seminar or e-learning course with like Harvard Business School or any of the major law schools in the UK or the US, do highlight them in your CV or your applications as well, because they are really fantastic evidence to show that you are actively pursuing learning the opportunity about the career. I generally say to keep them in a separate section to your work experience, particularly when you are coming from this as a career changer. I think your, to be frank about it, your career experience in your career is going to be far more interesting than completing a virtual program on Forage. I want to know much more about what you've done in your job than you doing a Forage program. But what the Forage program tells me is that you are actively pursuing your learning for the career. And that's the important element that maybe I won't be able to get to see from your just your work experience. So maybe think about including them in a additional section around like careers events and training. I'm wary of time. I've probably gone slightly over, but I too will try and stick around if there are any questions.
Thank you, Jess, and don't worry about time because I've got a plan on that. So don't worry. Thank you so much. I just think this must be so encouraging for the people, for all of our attendees, to have this level of information and detail, and to have these encourage. You know, there are ways around it. This isn't something you have to bury or hide in your CV. It's actually, these are all the things that we need to be drawing out. Just as you and Nettie have so eloquently explained this morning. So I'm really grateful. Thank you. That was fantastic. So I think we now can move on to Ayaz. If Ayaz is in the building. Ayaz, hello. Ayaz he's a professional coach to aspiring lawyers. And as I said earlier, he's the founder of the Commercial Law Pathway, which helps aspiring and junior lawyers to navigate their early career. So Ayaz, this is your bread and butter. This is what you're doing all day, every day, is supporting the next generation of lawyers to break into the field. What are your top tips? What would you like to share with us this morning? And everyone, please feel free to ask questions.
Yeah, please do feel free to ask questions. And I caught the tail end of Jess's session, which was really, really valuable. And I think it highlights the importance of probably my biggest tip, which is to make sure that throughout this entire process, you are showcasing yourself and your experiences and your authentic reasons for wanting to pursue this career. So great to be here. Like Melanie said, my name's Ayaz. I'm an ex-qualified solicitor at DWF, and I'm now a full-time coach to aspiring lawyers and junior lawyers navigating this very, very difficult process of going to qualification. So if anybody does have questions, do pop them in the chat. I've got it open so I can see it. Career changes, it's probably extremely daunting when going into a new environment such as the legal world, and then having to navigate these very, very long, arduous, challenging applications that require a lot of time and effort when time is already extremely sparse, and potentially alongside studies and other life commitments that you have. So I commend anyone that's going through this, and there are people here that have expertise and can share that with you to make sure that you're hopefully putting your best foot forward. So going into kind of application top tips for vacation schemes and training contracts, as I highlighted, my top kind of thing that I like, the running theme in all the advice that I give really is to make sure that you are your authentic self. If ever throughout this process you sit down and think, I'm going to say what I think the firm want to hear, in my opinion, that's the wrong approach. I've found, and I hope people would second me in saying this, making sure that you have, making sure that you're able to communicate your authentic and true self to the firm is the most important part of this process, because at the end of the day, your experiences, your life journey, your reasons for wanting to pursue this career and for working at that firm are the reason that make you attractive to the person and to the people that are hiring you throughout the process. So making sure that you communicate that to the best of your ability is so, so powerful and so liberating when you actually realize that you are the selling point of yourself, rather than thinking and sitting there and thinking, well, a lot of us get bound by imposter syndrome and kind of self-doubt and lack of self-belief, which is something that I suffered through this process. And as a result, I think, well, maybe I am not what they want specifically, so I'll mold myself into what I think they want to see or hear. And that didn't really work awfully well. So making sure that you portray your authentic version, your authentic reasons, and your authentic self is super, super important. Making sure that you do the research early into the type of firms, the type of work, and the type of law that you want to go in and practice is extremely important, because leading into the earlier point, that is, 75-80% of what you will have to be conveying to the firm that you're applying to as to why you want to work for that firm and in that particular area. So making sure that you have an early idea, whether it's based on, previous career experience, so that you can refer to, that you've got experience with, and then draw that in to the firms that you're applying to, would make that the reasons and the link between your prior experience and your potential new career trajectory much more aligned, much more justified. So I worked with a career changer last year who had a background in loss adjusting and insurance. He'd worked previously as a police officer as well, and he'd always had a yearning for to be a commercial lawyer, to be a lawyer. And he initially started his LLB undergrad when he was, I think, 18, but had to drop out due to family reasons. And then life took a whole different turn. He went to the police, had a family, got married, then went into insurance loss adjusting, but always had that itch to scratch for being a lawyer. And he then did his LLB at, I believe, Kingston University. I could be wrong, might be City. And found firms that really aligned with his previous experience of kind of insurance, loss adjusting, and now works for currently on his training contract at DWF, which are a large insurance firm. And him being able to leverage that previous experience and talk about it authentically as a driver for his new potential career trajectory was extremely valuable for him to draw the two together. So having an idea and those justified reasons from early are super, super important. I suppose following on from that, so you kind of selling your true self, knowing the reasons, is kind of making sure that you are disciplined with yourself. Like I mentioned earlier, life throws a lot at us at this juncture, and I can imagine it's even time is even more sparse when you're a career changer, because you've got other commitments, a career potentially that you've got to balance. So finding the time to put into research, into applications, into the preparation that is required, can be extremely hard. So making sure that you, whether it's blocking out time in your diary, whether it's sitting down on a Sunday evening and planning your time, planning your week so that you can dedicate the necessary time, is super, super important. And making sure that you hold yourself accountable, or find someone that can hold you accountable, is extremely important as well. Have you noticed any common characteristics of career changers that succeed in making the change to law, and those that don't? I am coming off the tail end of a flu, so I'll mute myself momentarily to cough. I apologise. Okay, so common characteristics. It's a really good question. I think not just with career changes, but with anyone that that succeeds in this process, it's a combination of, I'd say, 2 or 3 things. One is the drive and passion for this career, and it needs to be more than just surface level. I want a career in law for X reason. It has to be substantiated and justified with whether it's lived experience, whether it's the desire to work on certain types of deals or certain types of transactions, and having really thought about what that day job will look like in 5-10 years time. Having that reasoned rationale is super, super important. Having the perseverance and presence of mind to know that this isn't an easy process. I think people on this call that have been through it can attest to the fact that the rejections are and will forever be brutal, and they have forever lived with me, which is why I do this now. So being able to persevere in the face of rejection and realize that it's not a you issue. It's I don't like cliches often, but a rejection can be a redirection, and it can be, so long as you can sit and learn from the rejection, or sit and look at your application or the interview that you had and think, okay, me being critical on myself, what could I have done better in that performance or in that application, is extremely important. And then thirdly, I'd say just the self-confidence and self-belief that you are enough to achieve your desired goals. That for me was probably the biggest key to my success in the training contract application cycle, was actually realizing that I am capable, and looking around and thinking, I'm not too dissimilar from those around me, so I can do this. If someone else had done this, I can do this. And that, I think that's why I don't want to speak for you, Melanie, but I reckon that's why you do this, is to show that it's, it is doable. I can, if I can do this, so can you. And that's something that I like to preach a lot. So yeah, I think I don't think it's any key characteristics for career changes. It's just a general kind of mindset of people that succeed in this process, I believe. Do I still have time, Melanie?
You're fine, Ayaz, because I've got a little master plan up my sleeve.
I'm so intrigued. I'm so intrigued.
My session was recorded, so I'm going to push myself to the back, and then if we've got time, I'll put it on. Otherwise, I'll send it as a link after the session. Fine. That's the idea. And you're right, Ayaz. It is why I do what I do. And you and I have talked before about we feel that it's beneficial, or it would have been beneficial to us to have seen somebody that looks like us being successful.
Yeah.
And although we both have very different you know, for me, it was as a mature person. I did my law degree 20 years ago, that sort of thing. You've talked to me about you know, being an Asian male. I want to be out there to be a role model, to be to other people. If it's any source of encouragement, you know, that it can be done. That's absolutely it. And I do pick up on what you said about that mindset of dealing with rejections. I mean, I tried to get a training contract for 13 years, if that's any consolation to anyone else. And my law degree expired and then it got regenerated, like the whole thing. And so it's just that sometimes it isn't. I liked it when you said I think you said something about take the you out of it. It isn't personal necessarily to you. Take that as a redirection and go and do a bit more research. Keep trying. And if I look back at some of the training contracts applications I did, I was doing exactly what you said not to. I was just trying to put what I thought the firm wanted to hear. And when you're aligned, like you were describing with your candidate, if it's a proper alignment, it's a bit. I talked to Marissa, my early careers head, this week, and we said it's a bit like dating. It's got to be on both parties. You've got to feel like, you know, it's a good connection with the firm, and they've got to feel it with you. I'm mindful that we had another question here, which was, when applying for training contracts, should you narrow yourself into the area you want to specialise in, i.e. family? Will this narrow things too much as you need to train in other areas too? Do you have any thoughts on that, Ayaz? I can comment to that otherwise, because I was very narrowed.
You can comment first, because you are family, aren't you?
Yeah, and when I came out of university, I was just total tunnel vision. I was going to, if I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be a human rights lawyer, and it was almost like that was the highway. I knew I didn't see myself in a very corporate magic circle. It was human, so I just focused on these top 20 firms that practiced human rights law and just kept going on this loop, trying to go for that. And I think that was part of my downfall, if I'm honest, was that I was very narrow. And then as the years grew, or as they went by and my mindset changed, I sort of realized, for me personally, it's like there's human rights in so many different aspects of law, almost everything, in employment law, family law, court of protection. And really what I want to do is have that training contract experience so that I can cycle around the different departments, because you just never know. You go until you've actually until you've actually sat in that department, knowing what it actually feels like to, for example, practice family law. You might have an idea of it in your head, but the reality on the ground is totally different. Studying a subject and practicing it is quite different. So my advice would be, maybe get the experience if you possibly can, so that you know, and you also have then that conviction when you go for the job, set to say, I want to be in family law because I did this work experience, or I've sat in the court, or whatever it might be. Yeah, does that sort of align with you, Ayaz?
I agree. I think you can be. I was thinking this in my head as you were speaking, and then I'm now about to say it. I don't know if I'm on the right lines, but I think you can be narrow and broad in the same breath. Mm-hmm. I would be wary of being too narrow to then restrict yourself. I have one particular one-to-one at the moment that, in my opinion, and I've said this for a while to her, because I'm very honest, I think is too narrow, sorry. And that restricts the number of firms that you can target. And I think, as you rightly pointed out, you simply do not know what any area of law will be like until you sit in that department and actually experience it as a trainee fee earner in that role. You know, you can have an impression of what, I don't know, capital markets at A&O would feel like, because it sounds intense and quite complex, but until you're there, you don't know if you would enjoy it, hate it, despise it, not mind it. You have no idea. And as much as you go into, you know, the theoretical side of family law and think that might be something I would enjoy, you might get there as a, you know, potential trainee or paralegal or whatever it might be, and be there and think, actually, this is far too emotional for me, and I didn't expect it to have such a toll on my emotional health. So you just don't know. So I think it's good to have a vague idea, but not too restrictive that it kind of tunnels you down a certain path, unless you've got extremely relevant experience that you know that is where you would like to go.
Yeah,
I think.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ayaz.
No problem.
Fantastic. And Jess has just popped on the chat. She's put her links to her LinkedIn and to her Corporate Law Academy, where there are people giving fantastic advice. So maybe the other speakers, if you would like to do that too, to share your LinkedIn. Ayaz, you can share the commercial law pathway. We've run out of time to sort of talk about that, but
fine.
people can connect with you, and they've got a really great idea, hopefully, of the work that you do in mentoring young people, and they can have a look on your LinkedIn page to see all your success stories. It's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving up your Saturday.
Thanks, guys.
I really appreciate it.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye, Ayaz. And moving smoothly into the next talker, it's Sarah Breyer, who's going to speak to us about interview techniques. As I said, Sarah is a professional confidence and career coach with a specialism in introversy. And Sarah, are you with us?
I'm ready.
Hello. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. I've just popped something in the LinkedIn chat so that you can connect with me. You can find out all the things that I do. I guess the point of me kind of, we've only got 15 minutes, so I better canter on quickly.
Sarah, sorry to interrupt. I'm gonna move my 20-minute slot to the end, and I'm more than likely going to send it as a link. So please don't feel rushed or anything like that, because I think I'll just shift mine, and then we'll probably be back on track with Catherine. So take your time.
No worries. Thank you. There's just a lot to say in 15 minutes anyway. So I guess being an interviewee is like being a storyteller. So we are human beings. We love to listen to people's stories. If someone just says, buy this chocolate bar, they'll be just like, okay, great. But everyone remembers the lady in the bath eating the flake, don't they? Because it was a story that we could all look at, and, we could either go, oh, we'd never eat chocolate in the bath. What sort of weirdo does that? But we are humans and we love stories. So aside from the normal stuff that we all know, preparing for your interview in terms of knowing the firm, knowing what their mission is, their visions, their values, along with really what a lot of the other speakers have really already said, Nettie, Jess, Ayaz, about, being your authentic self, knowing what it is, why you're applying to that firm, what Mel said about, like applying to those organisations because that's where she sort of saw herself, but maybe there wasn't a compelling enough story for them to buy into. So think about your story. As career changers, you're not a 20-odd-year-old that's just gone, hey, I want to be a lawyer. You're a grown-up. You're somebody who's invested a lot of time, a lot of money. You've spent time away from your children. You've, neglected your family so that you can do these courses, that you can be this lawyer that you wanted to be. So tell them why. Tell them the compelling reason why you decided that you wanted to do this job. Nettie told us about hers. Her story was totally compelling. You'd hire her in a minute, wouldn't you? But why are you applying for this role? One of the questions that you'll likely get asked in any interview that you do is, tell me about yourself. And it is the worst question in the entire history of the world, because a lot of the times we can prepare ourselves for all this. Give me an example of a time that you've done this and that, but tell me about you is really hard, because quite often we're too busy worrying about everyone else that we forget about ourselves. So along with your compelling story, think about why you're applying for this job, why you're applying for this company. And what Ayaz was saying about that sort of authenticity and, not just bending into whatever they want is really true. Because if you go to a firm where like, we want to make the most money in the entire world and that's who we are, and you're like, I want to make people's lives better, the connection isn't right, and you're not the right person for them, they're not the right people for you, and you'll be miserable. So if you can tell them who you are, talk about the reason for your career change, that compelling story, you know, talk about it often, say it out loud as much as you can, so that when you say it out loud, I'm sure that it becomes an almost a reflex action. So why you're applying for this role, your compelling story, and then what do people say about you? So think about, if you've got a pen and paper in front of you now, just scribble down, what do your family say about you? Like, what do they why do they call you? Is it because you're the reliable one? Is it because, you know, you're the one that's really detail oriented and you can read that contract for them because they can't be bothered with it? Are you the one that is the most caring, the most empathic? Like, what do your family say about you? If you've got children, what do your children say about you? On a good day, of course. What do your previous colleagues, managers have said about you before? What are the common themes that keep coming up? And then make that as part, all of those things as part of your tell me about yourself pitch. Why you're applying for the job, your compelling reason why you want to why you're career changing, why you want to work for that firm, and what people say about you. So people say that I'm reliable. They come to me when they've got a problem. I'm a real key problem solver. People have always said that I behave like this, so that's why they want me on their side. That's probably the hardest piece and the bit that I would encourage you to practice. So even though what Ayaz was saying about this authenticity and all of that is absolutely true, but you actually have to practice your authenticity under pressure. Tell me about yourself, go. If you can even just write it down. I asked somebody the other day and they were like, I'm a mother of 2 children, I'm a grandmother, and I like walking in the countryside. And I was like, wow, I'm not going to hire you, because it's under pressure. That is her authentic self, but she didn't account for herself as well as she could have. The other thing that you might need to consider are competency-based questions. So things like, can you give an example of a time when you have done this? One of the things you can do, I don't know if any of you are AI users, just pop in the chat for me if you're a fan of AI. If you're not, you should be. It's something, especially as lawyers, like, you know, having to look at all of those documents. What AI can help you with is analysing any interview paperwork that you've got. So you can give it documentation, you can give it job descriptions, and ask it to act as an interviewer in X law firm and suggest a list of questions that might be asked based on this job description or this interview pack. And it will analyse the whole thing and give you some key themes. We've all heard of the STAR method, the situation, task, action, result way of answering interview questions. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. But the problem that you might be facing is that your situation and the task is not gritty enough. So while, as I said, you will need to connect those things, and Jess said it too, you'll need to connect it to your previous role, you know, like when you've solved a problem and all of those things that you can do. But quite often the problem is not gritty enough. So when you're preparing those questions, I would urge you to go back to the situation and the task part of it and make it really hairy. So as a very quick example, tell me about a time you've dealt with a difficult customer. Oh, you know, the situation was that they were calling, you know, they called in, they were shouting at a team member, they passed it to me, I talked to them nicely, the end, everyone was happy. When really what we want to say is, it was a dark, stormy day. There were 15 people off sick that day. The phones were ringing off the hook. People were waiting ages just to answer. So by the time my team member had answered the call, this person was furious that a bolt hadn't arrived in their package. The task was, we had to calm that person down because they were threatening to go on Twitter. They were going to email the CEO, and we did not want that in our department. Now, how compelling is that? It's, again, all about storytelling. So make the situation and make the task hairy and scary. Otherwise, why are you bothering to tell this story? The other thing about interviews is about making the other person comfortable, which sounds really weird, but go with me. A lot of people don't interview very often. The people that are interviewing you are lawyers. They're not interviewers. They're quite possibly not trained. They're just being given a bunch of questions and gone, go ask questions to those people. Maybe they've been chucked in last minute because someone got called to court. Your job is to make the person in the room as comfortable as possible. So the way to do that is to create conversation. So instead of question, answer, tell me about a time you did this, answer, blah, 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 blah. Try and make a conversation. So if they ask you, tell me about a time you dealt with a difficult customer, you finish your answer, customer was happy. What sort of difficulties do you guys have here? What you're doing is you're opening it up into a conversation, because actually we really love to talk about ourselves. And in this one-way conversation where you're talking and I'm asking questions, I don't feel part of it. I'm not bringing anything to this conversation. It's making me feel really useless, and like I'm just sat here answering these questions and asking these questions and writing them down. Try and bring the person into that conversation. Most people say the interview comes alive when you start asking questions at the end of it, where that person becomes animated and they tell you their favourite thing about the company or why they joined. Get that bit started earlier. I had a client the other day who said that she only spoke for 25% of that interview because she did as I told her to. And she said, I don't think it works, Sarah. They talk for too long. I didn't get to tell them about myself. The next day she got her second interview and then she got the job. So I've been Sarah Breyer. I help great people get great jobs, and I hope that helps. And if there's any questions, chuck them in the chat or I will be around later on.
Sarah, thank you. I made some notes there because I feel like what you talked about and what I've heard this morning continuously is like the power of the story, the power of the journey. That's what connects people, and we've really got to get to grips with it ourselves before we get into the interview. What is my journey? What is my story? And owning it. Like you were saying, that person that had the interview, or you said, tell me about yourself. If she'd own that, those are the most amazing things to me. You're a mum, you're a grandma, you love going for a walk, brilliant. But like the way you deliver it and the way you believe in it is what's going to come across. And just from my own personal experience, I feel like a tip I would follow on from what you said. I feel like when I've gone into an interview with a few questions up my sleeve, because they always tend to say at the end, don't they? Like, have you got any questions for us? Have some questions, like, even if you don't care about the answer, like it comes across really well. And I feel like at my NQ interviews, it came across well that I'd done, it's that research factor into the firm. And what do you like about the job? What are you exactly said? What are the difficult bits? And there's obviously that amazing tactic that it fills up a bit of time, and then you have less time for them to keep asking you.
You can collect yourself. Claire just asked, what about video interviews? Oh, I hate them. They're so one-sided. What I'd encourage you to do is, if you don't spend a lot of time doing any social media type videos, is practice. So the first time I ever did a video for social media, I had like a computer that was like a teleprompter, and I was like, and can you? It was so awkward, and I watched it back, and I was like, ew. And then I did some other like video type things, and I rarely watch stuff back now because it's icky, isn't it? But I watched it back and I was like, that is not me. The reason is because you can't see my body language. I'm quite bouncy as a person. So the more body that you can get into the video where you can demonstrate your body language.
And show a t-shirt like that.
I have a t-shirt like that, yeah. Yeah, don't wear that t-shirt. Nothing formal. But the more the more body that you can get into your video, the more that people can see your body language, because actually all you can see is here. I talk with my hands a lot, but you probably can't see it. So it makes me look really one-dimensional. The more that you can use rise and fall in your voice, when you do a video of yourself, you'll be really surprised at how flat you look. So you kind of have to use this rise and fall in your voice quite a lot more, like really ramp it up. Practice like on a, a WhatsApp video, send it to like your mum or something for a laugh. but do an example and you'll be really surprised. So just practice, like ramp it up, get as much of your body in there as possible, and make your voice as animated as possible. It sounds really mental, but when you watch yourself back, you'll see what I mean.
Thank you, Sarah. Really appreciate that. And the other couple of points I noted was just making your interviewer feel comfortable is a totally new one on me. I've never even thought about that. I've always thought, you must know why I'm so nervous. You should be making me feel comfortable. But that's a total switch and flip. So thank you for that. And then my other point, whilst I think of it, everyone, is I've put here recommendations on LinkedIn, because you were saying, what do your old work people think about you? And you may just think, I don't know, I didn't get the opportunity for feedback, or they never said. What I've done since, because I've only been on LinkedIn since February, because I worked in the local authority before, it wasn't really a thing. So I've been trying to build my professional profile, and there's a recommendation section that you can then ping to whomever you want. But I've done it to my previous employers who worked with me for 15 years. Like they're the people that know me the best. Can you just say what it was like working with me? And for anything, apart from anything else, it was really heartwarming. It was really nice that they took the time, they said nice things, and it's sitting on my profile. So I'd recommend any of you to do that, because it's just a showcase. And then you can say, again, with sincerity, this is what they say because I asked them for feedback, and this is literally what they said. It's not just what I think they'd say, it is what they say. So that was just something that popped into my head that I felt the need to get out there.
The other extra bit to that, Mel, is that not that we like to compare ourselves against anybody, but we always like look at other people and go, oh, you know, I can do that faster, or I can do this. If you think of somebody that you've worked with that you didn't rate, right, and it's not about them, this is about you, but think about somebody that you didn't rate, and everyone can think of somebody right that minute. I know you can. Somebody popped into your head. Think about why you're better. And it's not about why they're worse. It's about why you think you're better. Well, I had really good attention to detail. I never let people down. I always I do what I say I'm going to do. And they're your qualities. They're your personal standout qualities.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I'm so grateful. I'm sure everyone's massively enjoyed your session. You're very animated and speak with such passion and conviction. And I think you're going to put your link in the comments for people to connect with you. So that's super duper. So without further ado, I'm going to jump ahead of my session, and I'm going to go to Catherine, if Catherine's ready.
Hello. Hi.
Hello, Catherine.
Hello.
Would you be okay to present now?
I am indeed. Yeah, thank you so much, Mel. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so Sarah, I just wanted to say fantastic advice that you've given, and that story about, you know, using authenticity when you're demonstrating who you are. I'm hoping by what I share with you now might help you to understand how that authenticity can work for you. So I want to start by just giving you a bit of a potted history about where I've come from and how I've got to where I am now. Okay, so as Mel alluded to at the very beginning of the session, I was a weather presenter. And this was many years ago. So I'm 42 now. And when I went to university, I did a media degree, and yeah, I went into television for a few years and absolutely loved it. I ended up doing worked for ITV, BBC, and I was presenting the weather on Southampton TV at the time as well. And it was a wonderful, wonderful career. And then things changed, and I got into my mid to late 20s. I got married. I wanted to have kids. I wanted to settle down. And that lifestyle didn't really work for me anymore, living out of a suitcase and traveling all over the shop wherever I was asked to go. So I kind of sidestepped for quite a few years and went into the local authority and did media work with young people, and particularly those at risk of offending, in some pretty difficult areas in Bristol, and absolutely loved it. Had a great time, made some great work, and made some wonderful memories along the way. And then everything changed, and it was a huge, huge change. And at 32, I got divorced. And it wasn't just a straightforward divorce. And unfortunately, my divorce led me to end up being a solo parent very suddenly, with a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old to look after, Alfie and Charlotte. I had no second income, and my entire world went upside down. And I lost my home, and I had to leave my job. and I had to move back in with my parents just to make ends meet. And I felt like I lost my identity overnight. And it's taken me years to be able to even just vocalize and say that without any embarrassment or shame, and realize now that that was my superpower. Because at the time, I felt like I was a failure. And actually, I wasn't, because where it's led me to 10 years later is more than I could ever have imagined. So during that time, I had to really think on my feet and go, suddenly my priorities weren't what was important at that time. I had to think about two young children that were going through an awful lot of trauma for reasons that I won't go through in the call, obviously, but it was a really, really difficult few years, and I needed the support of my family. And financially, I just couldn't cope by myself. So I had to really pivot, as they say, and think, what am I going to do with my life? And an opportunity came up for me to get into project management in the construction industry. So for many years, that's what I did. And I did it because I had bills to pay and I needed to get money in the bank to get myself back on my feet again and to be able to live independently and give my children the life that I knew they truly deserved and I wanted to be able to give them as a solo parent. So that was a period of my life, if I'm honest, that was entirely frustrating because I wasn't doing what I wanted to do with my life. I was making decisions that were based on factors I could not control. And then COVID happened, and just before then I managed to secure my own home. We'd moved out, everything was brilliant, and COVID happened. And as you can imagine, the construction industry was one of the industries hit the worst because suddenly nobody was building houses, were they? If we remember, everything just went dead on the new build sites for some time, although I know conveyancers will say conversely they were working harder than anyone else because of the SDLT freeze. But for me, I was suddenly in a position where I was like, what am I going to do? This is just horrendous. You know, I was suddenly stuck in a position going, okay, everything I've worked towards isn't working for me right now. And although I wasn't in love with my job I was doing, it paid the bills. So I then went into local authority and I kind of stepped back into the public sector again, but this time it was all online work. It was COVID and I was training people in the health sector, bizarrely. But I think because I had those combination of skills and the things I'd done before with training, with the media, with working with different kinds of clients, it worked well. And I did that throughout for about 18 months. But during that time, and also while I was a project manager, all that kept coming back to me was, this isn't enough. This isn't me. This isn't my identity. This isn't where Catherine wants to be. But I didn't feel I could do anything else about it at that time. I just had to kind of roll with the punches and just kind of try and get through life as best I could. But law was always something in the back of my head. It was always there. It was always like, I want to do it. I want to do it. But how do I do it? And then suddenly the universities realised that they could deliver their postgrad degrees, etc., online because of COVID. And suddenly this kind of light bulb situation happened for me. And I went, I'm going to do the postgrad in law. I'm doing it. And it was probably half scary, half, brave, half, third stupid, decision made. But it was one of those moments where I started looking into it and I thought, I'm going to do this. I've gone through all of these difficulties in my life. I'm sure I can do this. If I really apply myself to it, I bet I can do this. So I applied. I was really lucky. I got a bit of a scholarship from the university that I went to with BPP. And I threw all my eggs into one basket. And I did the GDL full time over 10 months from home while I was still working as a trainer as well. And I was lucky that the work I was doing was completely online, so I could still do it from my home and I could study around that as well. It wasn't easy, I'm not going to lie. I was 2 children to take care of as well, but I made it work. And during that time as well, I was like, right, I've got to get a training contract now. How am I going to get one of these things? Crikey. So I started, as you do, putting my CV out to absolutely everybody. And I had that horrendous imposter syndrome of, is anyone going to want me? I'm like, I'm in my late 30s at this point thinking, yeah, I'm not a law grad, how am I going to convince these guys? And I got a lot of rejections. And then I had an invitation to go in for an interview with a firm that I ended up having my training contract with, actually. And funnily enough, leading up to the weekend before the interview, I'd unexpectedly had to spend the weekend with my daughter in hospital, who'd slipped and fell and did a really, really nasty damage and cut her tendon right through her knee. So I was having an operation that weekend, didn't sleep, was lying on a hospital bed next to her for nearly 3 days. Plus, it was just post-COVID. I didn't have a suit that fit me. Who had anything that fit them at the end of COVID? So there was me dropping my daughter first thing on the Monday morning out of hospital to my parents, going to Next to buy a suit that would fit. Been researching as well during the weekend at hospital, and then rocked up for this interview at this firm, and had prepared as best I possibly could. And I just thought, well, there's nothing for it. I'm just going to have to be really honest and explain my journey. And it was the first time I'd ever been truly honest and explained my background and what I'd done. But I tried to link in everything I'd done and where I'd been and how that demonstrated that I could actually be a really terrific solicitor. And they hired me on the spot. And I was rather taken back, and there was a few tears from me in front of the training manager at the end of the interview. And he held my CV up and he went, "This is why I'm giving you the training contract." And I hope that in itself can deliver you, you know, some positivity that actually your background, your history is your superpower. So make sure that you utilize it and you are yourself, okay? Because it's so, so important. So not only did I do that, but they also put me through my SQEs. So I went back, I finished my DDL, and then I knew I had my 2-year training contract ready to go when I'd done the GDL. So then I did my 2 years as a trainee solicitor. And whilst I did that, I also did my SQE1 and my SQE2. And I'm going to return back to a bit about those exams after I've finished this potted history. So bear with me. But I did that alongside the training contract, and it was at its infancy at the time. SQE2 had only just come out. So firms were very much learning on their feet as well, didn't really fully understand the implication of it, or you know, the requirements, or you know, how much time it would take for a trainee to be studying alongside being a trainee. So if you can imagine, I was studying for all of these exams, 20 of them in total, plus I was learning a brand new career in a law firm from scratch again. So I was exhausted, I'm not going to lie. It was really, really quite tiring. And obviously again, coming home every night to 2 children to take care of and studying, if I'm honest, most weekends for 2 years. But I stuck with it, I got through it, and I was really, really fortunate that I passed both sets of exams the first time. It's not been without its tears, I'm not going to lie, but I did it. And then I got to close to the end of my training contract, and I loved the firm I was with, and they were a fantastic place to be, and they've been really, really supportive. But I had a couple of priorities for myself that weren't going to align with the firm. One was my travelling. I had to travel for at least an hour and 15 minutes every day back and forth for each commute in order to get to the office. And secondly, I wasn't sure if, given this as a career changer, it was going to be the right place for me to grow in the way that I wanted to. You know, for me, it was about starting again, but I wanted to kind of accelerate my career as well. And I thought, if I'm putting this much energy into it, for me personally, I wanted it to be going in, you know, in the right direction, or having a pathway towards where I wanted it to be, which for me is ultimately, I want to be a partner one day. So I've qualified into commercial property. And for my seats, I did residential property first. Now, I'd done quite a few years in project management in the construction industry. So it was familiar territory, and I felt comfortable in a law firm going into something which I had some background in to begin with. And then I thought, you know what, I actually want to go and look at commercial to see what it's about. So I spent the following 18 months of my training in commercial law and also commercial property, and realised, yeah, I absolutely love this. I love the transactional nature of the work, and I just really enjoyed the nuts and bolts of it day to day and the variety of the work that we do. So I got to the end of my training contract, and I was so fortunate. They offered me a position, and it was so tough because I left, and it was a, you know, it was a massively scary but brave decision for myself, because I'd actually applied to go to a legal 200 firm, and I thought, I'm going to give this a go and see what happens. I loved what this firm Porter Dodson stood for in the Southwest. I loved the fact that they were very commercial, yet they kept themselves very personal as well. I went through the interview process with them, and it was a 3-stage interview process. So they certainly put me through my paces. And I remember even coming back from that and thinking, are they going to want me as a career changer? I'm a bit older here, you know, but I just kept remembering, this is my superpower, where I've come from. This is where I'm going to sell myself. And I remember, and it's interesting what Sarah said about, you know, the engaging in the interview and actually talking, you know, not being transactional with your behaviour in an interview. And actually, we spent a lot of time me listening and talking with the partner that was interviewing me and the senior associate about their journey and how they got into law. And at the end, the partner said, "Thank you so much. This has been a really enjoyable interview." So I was like, great, okay, I've, you know, I think we're doing okay. And I felt it from the interview as well. I thought, you know what, I could really, really enjoy working with these people. So, you know, that was my journey in a nutshell. And now I'm I'm working for the firm. I'm in a fantastic team, and I'm a commercial property solicitor in a legal 200 firm. And I, you know, in an area that I love, working in a part of the country that I love, with a team that have just been fantastic. So I'm really, really utterly grateful for my journey. And I've had a few pinch me moments, and I think sometimes my biggest tears came the day that my certificate came through from the SRA to show me that, you know, to say I'm now on the roll, I'm a registered solicitor. That was a huge moment for me personally. And what I did was, if we go back then, during my study time, I felt really isolated. I didn't feel like there was anyone around that was really like me as a career changer. So I set up, and I'll share a link on here, the SQE Success Hub, and it's a WhatsApp community. And there's now over 1,800 students and trainee solicitors on the community who are studying for the exams. And it's basically, it's a shoulder to cry on. It's an avenue for support. It's a way to study together. And, you know, the great thing is it's free, and who doesn't love a free resource? So I've now got a team of 10 moderators who really successfully moderate that. We try and make sure that we keep the scammers down to a minimum as well, because we know they're rife, aren't they, on Reddit and the Facebook SQE groups. If anyone's on them, they're all over the shop. So we really try and monitor it. So for anyone that wants to come along, you know, to that. And then alongside that as well, I set up my limited company. So I actually deliver workshops on how to get through the SQE2 exams, specifically because I think they're really precise, and they're very, very specific, and you've just got to nail it right to get through those particular exams. But looking at the SQE then, in a bit of a nutshell, so SQE1 is your multiple choice exams. So you've got functional legal knowledge 1 and functional legal knowledge 2, and you're going to have 2 days worth of multiple choice exams for those. Now, I think the scary bit about that is the pass rate. And if any of you know much about the pass rate on it, you'll know that it's between, I think, 49 to 52% of people are passing it first time each go. They're not fun, but they are achievable. And that's the bit I always say. So I studied for them part-time in my own time. And at weekends, and I studied for them over about 10 months before I took those exams. And I think the biggest thing to kind of message to give to you, if you're considering this journey, is think about your time management and how you're going to make it work, particularly if you're working full time. Like myself as a trainee solicitor, I was not learning just the exams, but I was learning this whole host of new things in a law firm at the bottom of the ladder again as a career changer. And I'm not going to lie, I probably bit off a little bit more than I could chew at times. I absolutely did. And I know that there were a few meltdowns at home along the way where I had a few nights of, oh God, am I going to get through this? Am I going to, am I able to do this? And that fear of failure, I think, really drove me on tremendously. But I made sure that I had a plan, and it was a flexible rotational plan that I adopted throughout all of my study to make sure that I was being realistic with myself. And I tried to hook up with people on the community that I'd set up along the way in similar circumstances so that we could study online together. So I got through that. And then it was the SQE2 exams. So I got the results in the beginning of September for SQE1. And I was like, no, you know what? I'm going to get straight on with SQE2. I'm absolutely sick to the back teeth of long revision periods now. So I started revising for the SQE2 in the September, and I took the exams in the January. That was probably, in some respects, the toughest part of the journey for me, because it was such a substantial amount of work to revise for, as well as be a trainee. And you know, that plan was quite intense. And if you're considering the same kind of time scale, yes, it can be done, but I would say you've got to be very disciplined with yourself, and you've got to be very sure of what your plan is. For me, I've got children that will always distract me. You know, I've got other priorities that need to be taken care of. So I had to think about that constantly and think about how my plan could work. But I also factored in areas where life was going to get in the way, and accept that life is going to get in the way, and that that's okay, because I'm working enough that I can account for those periods of time as well. You know, like Christmas time, I always say to other students, don't bombard yourself. If you celebrate Christmas, don't bombard yourself. It's no fun, is it? You know, reduce your revision time down, you know, accept that that's not going to happen during the Christmas break, because we don't want that, do we? If we're celebrating, and it's hard to try and live up to those expectations of yourself if they're not achievable. So I tried to be achievable with that. I made plans, and then I got COVID 2 weeks before the SQE2 assessments, and it hit me pretty bad. And I was lying on the sofa, I think it was about 5 days, just with that horrid exhaustion and going, oh dear God, this is just the last thing I need right now. But I knew I had to keep reminding myself, no, Catherine, you've planned for this. You know, you've done enough work, that you've planned that if things go awry, that you've done enough to this point that you can pick it back up. So I just had to accept at that point that I had to step away from the books. And then we were maybe about 5 or 6 days out from the exams, and I took that week off from work as unpaid leave, because I knew I'd need it. And then it was just a case of, okay, head back down, let's get on with it. And I did the exams. I had all of my written in week 1, back to back over 3 days. And then the following week, I had to travel and stay at Cardiff for 2 nights to do the oral exams. And I remember being so exhausted by day 2. And my daughter rang me in the morning to say, oh, I love you, mummy, and go to school. And I remember just breaking down in tears on the phone to my poor daughter, going, it's fine, mummy's nearly done. There's no more to go. I know it's been a long road, but I'm nearly done now. You know, because to me, it was just, it was the end of a long, long journey. But you know what? I did it, and I got the pass. And here I am now as a qualified solicitor in a fantastic firm, doing something I love. And for me, it was about having self-worth and having a value. And to me, I wanted a bit of an identity for myself as well. And that's what this has given me. I would say that it's not easy. It's not, you know, being an NQ is tough. You're learning new skills all the time. And I think also coming as a career changer, you give yourself quite a hard time when you're going, oh, I'm getting something wrong, or I'm making mistakes, because you expect yourself to be better all the time, because you've come from somewhere where you've got lots of confidence. So, you know, accept that mistakes can happen, and really think hard about the kind of firm that you want to be in to support you. But that's, you know, that's my journey in a nutshell, really.
I've nearly nodded my monitor off my desk because I'm doing like this so much. The whole thing's shaking. I'm not going to lie, I feel really emotional hearing you talk. And I think your children will be so proud of you, or you're proud of yourself, but when they listen and hear it back, and I just feel like you're such a dynamo. I don't know how you've done it, because I did it, but I did it part-time with a really supportive husband and an army, like a village, bringing up my children. And there's just loads of comments on the chat. I don't know if you've seen them, Catherine, but I think people are really, really loving, like they said, your honesty is so refreshing. They needed to hear this today. It's so inspiring. I completely relate. I'm in the thick of it now. And I just, you know, it is exhausting. I feel exhausted. I just thinking about, I feel like you like feel like a hamster on a treadmill, and you can't get off it, because there isn't really an off option. And I just wish you could just have a year off, because I just feel like you've done so much that you deserve.
I need a year off. I know.
Oh my God,
Christmas
now it's like
coming.
you do all of that, and then you're like, oh God, I've got to do the job now. Like, what have I done?
That's what I say. Whenever it goes, how's it going? I go, well, I've got to be a grown up now.
Yeah, I've got to actually do the thing that I've been doing for years, training for. Amazing achievement, so much energy. Yeah, it is. It's absolutely inspiring, and great to hear another single parent going through this. Absolutely, like, absolute hats off to you. Thank you, Catherine. So grateful. And anyone, I don't know if it's possible to put the link to the SQE Hub in the chat.
Yeah, I'm going to pop all of it in there, and I'll pop the Insta page in, and I'll pop the link in. So come and join in the hub. We've also got a specific group for parents who are studying as well.
Amazing.
So, and that's usually blows up late night with people going, I've had enough, I can't cope.
Yeah.
So that's quite a good little resource as well for people. So definitely hook into that, guys.
That's fantastic. And someone's put in the comments here as well, the isolation is real. And I think that's why Catherine and I and the other career changers here do this, because we do know like how painful this is, how confronting and exposing and exhausting, and just, you know, but then when we've come out the other side of it, we're here to support you and say, like, it is, like, you will come out alive. You might be a bit battered and bruised, and there will be lots of tears along the way, but
got more grey hairs. I've definitely got more grey hairs, so I've just pre-watered
hence the highlights. Anyway, Catherine's so grateful, and I'm sure people will be really keen to connect with you and learn more, join the hub if that's relevant for them. So very grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
And then that leaves us finally to Nedra from the Career Changers. I always get this wrong. Sorry, Nedra, Career Changers Legal Network, who's going to talk to us about networking and building your legal brand. And I think, Nedra, is your session, is it 15 minutes or 20 minutes?
15 minutes.
15. So, wow, how about that? So everybody, I'm going to hand over to Nedra. Please do put more comments as we go along. If we run over by a bit, but please, everybody, I appreciate it's a long session. Leave when you feel you want to. And we will, after the session, give out all the resources that have been mentioned. I've been having lots of messages from the presenters saying they've got documents and things to share, so we'll get all of that to you. I'm going to get the list. I'm going to forward you all the interview that I did with Marissa Sanders, the head of early careers at Irwin Mitchell, where she's given a lot of insight into being on the other side of the table and tells you basically what those law firms are actually looking for. I know you've had a lot of that this morning, but I think it's helpful to hear it from their perspective too. So over to you, Nedra. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. And Catherine, that was such an amazing story, and I could resonate a lot with, you know, what you have gone through over the years, you know, trying to get into the legal industry and, you know, the rejections and everything like that. So really, really fantastic story. So just a little background about myself. I think Melanie might have mentioned a few. I am the chair of the Career Changers Legal Network, and I'm currently a trainee solicitor in my final seat at Howell Jones Solicitors. I am due to qualify in April 2025, and I'm looking to qualify in the private client law area, which most of you might know as wills and probate. Also a career changer, and my previous career was in the Royal Navy, where I spent 9.5 years. I started my law degree in 2014 and left the Navy in 2017. In 2018, I started my my legal practice course, and on completion, I obtained my first legal opportunity as an office assistant in a law firm. After that, well, in between, I've changed firms probably 3 times. In 2023, I started my training contract. And in between that, again, I transferred my training contract to my now firm. So it's a little bit of a TikToking going on here and there. However, as I said, in 2025, due to qualify. So that takes me roughly around 11 years from the point of starting my my degree to when I qualify. So that might sound a bit, you know, a long time. I think Catherine mentioned it took her roughly 10 years. So that might be, you know, some sort of a normal time frame in which from the time you start your transition to when you eventually get to qualify. And I say all of this to say, as a result of all of that, my opportunity where I got to transfer my training contract, it was due to the power of networking. And that brings me, smoothly into, if you ask the question, what really is networking? Initially, when I, left the Navy and I started to hear people talking about networking, in the back of my mind, I used to think networking is something like, you go into a room packed with a lot of people, hopefuls, let's say, or even old gentlemen, or with your business card to just hand out business cards. But we don't really have business cards. Not everyday people have business cards, and but I take networking to be a process, and it's a process where you build and maintain relationships. And in order for for that to actually work, it helps you to access opportunities or even increase your knowledge in a specific area, or even build relationships. Now, in relation to accessing opportunities, these people that you meet, if you, let's say, attend networking events, they're like a doorway into opportunities, as I read put it. So earlier on, I used to attend like conferences or panel discussions. It could be even like charity balls, like that different groups might put on. So a very good thing to do at an early stage is to be a part of or become a member of different groups. It could be a local junior lawyers division. It could even be, later on lawyers. I'm sure most of you might be, or Career Changers Legal Network, or the SQE Hub. There's a lot of different groups out there depending on your interest. And it's always good to have something about yourself to say to someone if you attend networking events, or you're out networking. Always have like an elevator pitch, as some people might call it. So not just to go out there and just starting to say things randomly, but once you have something prepared, it will have a good outlook. Like, the first impression is what counts sometimes. And have your like the impression that you create at that first moment you meet someone could be lasting depending on what you say. So having something prepared is always a very good and important factor. So I mentioned about attending events and also leveraging your social media. Not everyone is social media savvy, or very keen on social media. But one of the good things when you have, especially LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is one of the professional networks out there, having posts, like, let's say you post at least once a week or once a day, if even, this can help to sort of project your profile to people who are on there. And for especially US career changers, you have a whole career before you start to try to get into the legal profession. You would be, as most firms are looking for people who are commercially aware. So you already have that in the bag. So you put your commercial awareness and, like what you are interested in, your interest, put it all out there. Your story, as this is a theme that, most of the speakers before me has mentioned, your story is your superpower. Once you put your story out there, once you put your interests out there, even from your previous career, and try to mix it in with your legal career going forward, that could project your profile forward and help you to outshine and be present in people's minds. And I've heard Aya's said earlier about being genuine and authentic. In networking, you have to be genuine and authentic, because the last thing you want to do is, just as mentioned before, is just to say whatever you think people want to hear. That would never work. So in terms of building your personal brand, what is your personal brand? And is something that people struggle with, because I did struggle with what does that really mean? Because in this day and age of social media, and everyone have their profiles out there and their faces and everything out there, it's not something that resonated with me before. And what I started to do was not to increase my my legal brand, or trying to put my legal brand out there. But I had a story, and I decided, what, I'm just going to put my story out there, especially my experience from being in the Royal Navy. And all of a sudden, I started to, receive, messages asking about, like, more into, like, what my story was about. And this shows me, especially when I was going through the process, as Catherine said, rightfully said earlier, going through the process, I didn't really see anyone out there like with the same thing as, like, career changer. There wasn't such a thing around that time, or like, a group to support my transition, or I didn't know where to go, who to turn to, what questions to ask, what's my next step. I didn't have any of that. And that brings me to the reason Career Changes Legal Network was created, because I've realized that, so many of us are out there, and we just don't know what the answers are. So this, I would say, is my personal brand, in a sense, because it differentiates me from anyone else, from everyone else out there. And that's what your personal brand should be about, differentiating yourself. So let's say you're posting on LinkedIn, or even Instagram. I think a lot of firms use Instagram as well. So you differentiate yourself, you attract opportunities by the things that you say. And your personal brand is more or less what others perceive you to be, and also the way that you project yourself into the sphere. And also you build credibility in that way, because the post that you put out on your social media, I'll use LinkedIn as an example. The post you put out on LinkedIn, it says a lot about you. And if, when you build these network and you maintain these connections that you have, they will be able now to recommend you or refer you to other people. And something I was thinking about earlier, when, let's say, when you attend networking events, it's not all about networking with, firms, or like, partners who will be able to give you opportunities. Junior lawyers as well, like attending junior lawyers events. And when I say junior lawyers, it doesn't have anything to do with age, it's just junior as in experience. Attending these, forming networks at even these, early stages, you are creating friendships, you are creating connections. And even later on, when you've become a qualified lawyer, these connections are able to refer and recommend, clients or even opportunities to you as well. There's I actually prepared a presentation for this, and I had some fun facts, but I'll just read them out, as I'm not able to share my screen. So fun facts in the in terms of like a summary. So most successful networkers follow up within 48 hours of meeting someone. So that is a very important aspect of when you network with people, because once you're able to start building a connection, in order to maintain that, the first thing you should aim to do is to follow up with that connection, and send a thank you, and it keeps you present in that person's mind. One thoughtful LinkedIn post per week can significantly boost your visibility. Well, I've touched on that earlier, and that's quite self-explanatory. Another one is professionals who approach networking with the mindset of giving, including sharing insight or making introductions to other people, rather than taking away from the networking experience, typically builds stronger networks. Because if you go with the mindset of like, you know, I need to meet, you know, let's say 3 people today, and I need to see if I could get to, you know, get opportunities from these people, that's not the best mindset to go into networking with. So if, let's say, for example, you are there with other people that you know, you can make introductions to other people. And with other people seeing that, you know, that effort that you go through to introduce other people, it opens up a channel for like reciprocating relationships. People typically need to interact with your personal brand at least 3 times before they remember you. So that's, I think it was Ayaz or maybe Sarah mentioned that your story is what people remembers. And by sharing your story, you don't have to get into, you know, too much personal details, but just broadly sharing your story. You know, this is a way, it's an open door for people to understand your journey and what you've been through. And also it shows your commitment to wanting to get into the profession as well. And the last tip I have is regular networking. Networkers are 70% more likely to secure their desired role. And if I should sort of touch on what I mentioned earlier in relation to the power of networking that, you know, opened up the door for an opportunity for me to transfer my training contract. This goes back to a group that I was a part of. And, you know, I network quite a lot. In the earlier stages, I used to attend all sorts. And because of a contact that I maintained, or we maintained, I was able to obtain that opportunity because she recommended me to her firm, and her firm reached out to me. And the reason for the transfer was the fact that I knew what I wanted to qualify in. Because as I mentioned, I wanted to qualify into private. I am going to qualify into private clients. And this is that actual point that sort of cemented the opportunity for me, just because I know what area of law I wanted to get into. And I remember Ayaz was mentioning earlier as well that, you know, you could have a narrow view, you could have a broad view. It just depends on how narrow that you have your view into what area of law that you want to get into. And everyone's experience is quite different, because as much as I knew what area I want to get into, when I just started out, I wanted to be in, I wanted to qualify as a residential property lawyer. And I was quite adamant that, you know, that's where I want to get into. But when I got the opportunity from my first paralegal role, it was in private client. And I was fighting tooth and nail to get into the property department, which didn't happen for me. But when I did eventually get an opportunity into property, it wasn't what I expected it to be. And having over 2 years of private client experience at that particular time, it's really cemented to me that this is what I wanted to get into. What was I thinking about property? You know, no offense to anyone who wants to get into property, but, you know, that really was the point where I realized, actually, this is what I want to get into. And because of that, helped me to obtain that opportunity, which I am currently in. So I think I'm going to stop right here and pass you over to Melanie.
Thank you so much, Nedra. I think all of these really personal stories are just so encouraging to the people on the chat today, on the session today. And I think it's a really opportune moment just to say thank you to all of our speakers. You have been absolutely fantastic, giving up your Saturday mornings for free to share your wisdom, your talents, your insights for everybody. So thank you to Nettie, to Jess, to Ayaz, to Sarah, Catherine, and obviously Nedra and myself. It's been such a joy to spend the morning with you all. I hope it's been helpful. There is a recording, so we will get that onto our pages or sent to you however best we can. Any further questions that you have after this session, just ping them over to me or Nedra. We're both on LinkedIn, and we will get them. We'll connect you with the speakers or whatever you need to happen. So thank you very much. And with that, I'll let you get on with your Saturdays.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.